Left, Right, in the Middle is made possible through grant funding by SRCI, the Student Research and Creativity Institute at Saginaw Valley State University. SRCI, your dream, your project, your research.
For over a century after the end of the American Civil War, this was a country of states united. In peace and prosperity, in hardship and strife, Americans were one people. Through the Industrial Age, the Great Depression, the Space Age, and the age of chain restaurant mini-malls. But by the end of the 20th century, a new national conflict emerged, the Culture War. It was a bitter struggle that pitted brother against brother, soccer mom against hockey mom, and left the United States of America torn in half. The Culture War was fought from Brooklyn Heights to Boise, from Scranton to San Francisco. The casualties are impossible to tally. The war made some rich, ruined others, and changed forever the lives of all who lived through it. But in the face of such division and hatred, a new hope emerged. A rising tide of Americans called for the long and bitter Culture War to end. But for those who lived for it, profited from it, and defined themselves by it, ending the Culture War would be like America waving the white flag of surrender to itself.
It's amazing to me that some people don't even acknowledge that the Culture War is going on. They're completely oblivious. I mean, look around you. If it wasn't real, how could all the news channels be talking about it?
How can we be worried about things like the economy, or global warming, or our jobs, when the couple who moved in down the street have a poodle that looks French?
I was going to vote on the issues, but with this culture war going on, I better vote for somebody who's just like me, even if they are a total dumbass.
I took a journey back in time, bring 1,000 places, into a dream of a distant land, a dream of 1,000 faces. I was turned back from Rome, but they were all my demons. A high speed tried to change my ways, and couldn't find a reason. Such a woman.
Welcome to Left, Right, in the Middle. I'm your host, Scott. The opening audio was an excerpt from a video short titled The Culture War, a video parody of Ken Burns' Civil War documentary. You can view the entire video at the show's website, lrtmpodcast.com. And if you would like a good laugh, I recommend that you do just that. So of course this was humor, yet there is unfortunately a lot of truth behind what was said in the audio. The culture war, or those issues that seem to fall under the guise of the culture war, seem to drive our politics. so that we tend to vote for a candidate based more on our religious or moral beliefs than on a particular candidate's actual qualifications. We look to vote for somebody who is like us, or at least does a good job of creating a personification that appeals to our ideals. So in this episode of Left, Right, in the Middle, I'm going to discuss how the culture war has evolved over the last 40 years or so, along with the ramifications of that evolution. In retrospect, I think I should have done this show follow my initial show on ideologies, because ultimately the culture war is a pitting of ideologies, with the media and our politicians allowing the views of about half the voting populace to control the political landscape. I say this because about 25 to 30% of voters are hardcore conservatives, and about 25 to 30% are hardcore liberals, and that leaves about 40 to 50% that fall along the middle, with, of course, some leaning more right and some leaning more left. It seems, however, to be extreme positions on issues that garner the most attention and drive our political discourse. And what do I hope to accomplish by discussing this topic? Well, I don't know. I don't know that I can convince anyone to stop voting for a candidate merely because he or she is against abortion or because a candidate supports gay marriage. But you have no idea what the candidate's qualifications are as a legislator, or what he or she could do for things like the economy, or education, or energy policy, or foreign policy. You know, the important stuff. What these culture war issues do is deflect from the important stuff and cause voters to vote for their ideal America, perhaps a romanticized America. But I've said it on this show before and I'll say it again. We are a nation of roughly 340 million people with varying ideologies and religious views. Given that fact, there is always going to be moral and ideological conflict. What we need to do is focus on the issues that truly affect society, not issues that offend our morality. That, of course, is easier said than done. So I hope you stay tuned to this episode of Left, Right, in the Middle and hopefully gain a better understanding of how these culture war issues continue to divide us as a nation and keep us from addressing or focusing on the issues that we should be focusing on.
And all the stones you've thrown, they come back twice as strong. And all the stones I've thrown tell me that nothing lasts.
Before I get into this episode's topic, I want to quickly touch on last episode's topic, global climate change, as there was a report issued since I produced that show that I think is worth mentioning. On the 11th of January, the National Climate Assessment Advisory Committee, a 60-person federal advisory panel, published the nation's third climate change assessment since 1991. And this report suggests that evidence is now stronger and clearer than ever that climate change is happening, and primarily as a result of human activities, largely due to the copious burning of fossil fuels. The report further suggests that the nation can expect increased impacts on everything from crops to fresh water supplies, and that better and broader national plans for adaptation are needed. Now, none of what this report states is new information or much of a revelation, but it does support what many, including James Hansen, have been saying for over 30 years. I mean, look, how long can we be told that the dam is about to burst, believe that the information is credible, yet believe that if we either ignore it or possibly just stick our finger in the hole that the problem will go away? We have to act now concerning global climate change. Now, a link to this report is available at the show's website, lrtmpodcast.com. Now, another issue concerning climate change, and something that's linked to this show, in researching the topic of the culture war, I came across an article at the Stanford Social Innovation Review written by Andrew J. Hoffman, the Holson Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the University of Michigan. It's titled, Climate Science as Culture War. This article explores Hoffman's desire to explore why it is that there exists scientific consensus concerning global climate change, yet there exists nothing even near social consensus. Hoffman attributes the lack of social consensus to the ideological divide caused by the culture war. I'm not going to get into the article itself, but as always, a link is available at the show's website, and I recommend that you take the time to read it. The article goes beyond assessing the culture war's place in acceptance of climate change. It also presents possible solutions and ways forward. Now, you could likely make the argument that the culture war is as old as the nation itself, if you consider that positions on culture war issues generally follow ideological divides, and there has been ideological division dating back to the drafting of the Constitution itself, and there has always been a culture war to some extent. However, I believe the culture war in its modern form is a product of the cultural revolution that took place throughout the 1960s, Nixon's silent majority speech in 1969, and Roe v. Wade, the landmark Supreme Court case that upheld a woman's right to have an abortion in 1973. The Cultural Revolution of the 60s served to redefine societal norms and mores concerning, most significantly, minority and female rights, as well as female sexuality. There was also the Stonewall Riot in Greenwich Village in 1969 that was essentially the first stance against oppression by the homosexual community. I think the conservative pushback against these changes is still present today, and is a driving force behind much of the culture war. One of the ways that was manifested early on was Nixon's silent majority speech on the 3rd of November 1969. And here's an excerpt from that speech.
And so tonight, to you, the great silent majority of my fellow Americans, I ask for your support. I pledged in my campaign for the presidency to end the war in a way that we could win the peace. I have initiated a plan of action which will enable me to keep that pledge. The more support I can have from the American people, the sooner that pledge can be redeemed. For the more divided we are at home, the less likely the enemy is to negotiate at Paris. Let us be united for peace. Let us also be united against defeat. Because let us understand, North Vietnam cannot defeat or humiliate the United States. Only Americans can do that.
This speech has been interpreted in many ways, with some going as far to say that it had racist undertones. Now, I don't believe that, but I do believe that Nixon was pitting war protesters against everyone else in this speech. The irony here is that Nixon talked about uniting people while he was effectively driving a wedge between them. Whether it was intended or not, it was somewhat Orwellian. Moreover, I think the long-term ramifications of that statement created an us and them mentality in many people, and I mean on both sides of the political spectrum. I believe that this was the first salvo fired in the culture war that we are living in today. So the 60s Cultural Revolution created divisions. Nixon inserted a wedge into it in 1969, and then the Supreme Court drove that wedge in with a sledgehammer in 1973 with the Roe v. Wade decision that upheld a woman's right to have an abortion. From here on out, the main battle lines of the culture war had been established: rich versus poor, women's rights, especially related to abortions, minority rights, gay rights, and religion's place in our culture. However, while our present culture war was likely a product of the 60s that effectively took root in the 70s, it wasn't defined as such until 1991. In that year, sociologist J.D. Hunter published the book Culture Wars: The Struggle to Define America. In it, Hunter theorizes that the culture war has divided Americans into culturally orthodox and culturally progressive camps. An excerpt from pages 290 and 291 nicely summarizes Hunter's sentiments concerning the culture war, and here's what it says. The opposed moral visions at the heart of the culture war and the rhetoric that sustains them acquire something of a life of their own. The culture war is rooted in an ongoing realignment of American public culture and has become institutionalized chiefly through special purpose organization, denominations, political parties, and even branches of government. The fundamental disagreements that characterize the culture war, we have also seen, have become even further aggravated by virtue of the technology of public discourse, the very means by which disagreements are voiced in public. In the end, however, the opposing moral visions become a reality much larger than, indeed autonomous from, the sum total of individuals and organizations that give expression to the conflict. It is these competing moral visions and the rhetoric that sustains them that becomes the defining forces of public life. So here, I think, are a few key things to take from this. The culture war is rooted in an ongoing realignment of American public culture. And it's basically the evolution of society itself that keeps creating issues that can be new battlegrounds for the culture war. As society evolves, new things are going to keep coming to the forefront. And the next point is that he says it is becoming institutionalized. And you see that in things like churches or the media, various organizations that basically now are taking up sides and really making it known where they stand along the lines of the culture war. As far as media goes, of course, you have the Fox News, which is a lot more conservative, and things like MSNBC, which goes along more the line of the liberal side. And they pick and choose what stories they want to cover and how they want to cover it to basically frame issues to support their views. And I think a key point here is that it's aggravated by technology and public discourse. Now, as we've gone into the social media age, everybody has the ability to put out information, to put out their opinions, and to do it anonymously. And a lot of times this means you don't need to have a source. You don't really need to even have any facts. You just need to have an opinion, and you need to have a meme that you can run with. And people are really running with those memes now. And what this has done is it has hurt public discourse. We don't talk about things anymore. We gather information that reinforces our preconceived notions, and then we accept what we think is truth without really gathering facts. And then the last point on that is, most importantly, there are opposing moral visions and rhetoric that sustain it. And that kind of goes along the line of what I was just previously saying. You have two sides that already have their point of view set. And all they're really trying to do is find ways that they can support their argument through rhetorical means. And so, as if on cue, and remember Hunter's book was published in 1991, in 1992 at the Republican National Convention, Pat Buchanan had this to say.
Friends, this election is about more than who gets what. It is about who we are. It is about what we believe and what we stand for as Americans. There is a religious war going on in this country. It is a cultural war as critical to the kind of nation we shall be as the Cold War itself, but this war is for the soul of America.
This war is for the soul of America. Now, Hunter spoke of rhetoric that sustains the culture war. Well, here was rhetoric that propelled it into the 21st century. I think that following Buchanan's speech, the culture war went mainstream. Nixon's silent majority speech was ambiguous, leaving it open for interpretation. Buchanan's speech left no room for interpretation. There was a line in the sand drawn, and if you were on Buchanan's side, you were a righteous conservative. If you weren't, you were a pagan liberal. What I played is just a snippet of a half-hour speech. A link to the entire speech is available on the link page at the show's website. Now, what Buchanan did in that speech established the paradigm for how nearly every issue is handled today. Things are black and white, or you have choice A or B, or something or someone is either good or evil. And how you see it, or are directed to see it, is dependent on your ideology. Well, the thing is, sometimes there's a lot of gray, or you might want to look at choices C through Z, or something or someone might just be benign, for lack of a better word. This is what we all need to do. We need to step out of the paradigm that has been created concerning the culture war and ask ourselves if we want it, to quote Hunter, to be the defining force of public life. And I think it goes even beyond that now. When you think of the culture war, you think of a clash of morality and values and what our way of life should be. However, now it seems that the culture war affects policy in areas outside of this realm. As noted earlier, the culture war plays a role in the global climate change debate. So I think that it necessarily follows that our energy policy is also affected by it. I believe the culture war also plays a role in our healthcare policies, as the healthcare issue has been as much about whether someone is worthy of healthcare as it has been about the quality or cost of healthcare in America. I think that if you look into nearly any issue, you can find ways in which the culture war and its divisive underpinnings are at play concerning the issue. Moreover, I think this is by design. You see, what both sides have done is create a character of the enemy in this war, a personification of that which needs to be defeated. And if that enemy isn't defeated, your way of life will cease to exist. This is scary for many people. If you are conservative, you don't want to be forced to live a secular liberal lifestyle. And conversely, if you are a liberal, you don't want to be forced to live an orthodox conservative lifestyle. By connecting an issue to the culture war, even very loosely, you can feed off of these fears and draw people to your side no matter the actual facts concerning the issue. But I think that what people are failing to recognize is that to win this war means being the side that gets to define that which is ever-changing and ever-evolving, that being our society. And I ask you this, how can you define or create the paradigm for that which is ever-changing and ever-evolving? So there can never be a true winner in this war. There will always be another battlefront, which means that we all, every citizen in this country, will be forever losing as long as we allow the culture war to dominate our politics and policy and keep us from legislating for a better society rather than a desired morality.
I can tell by your face you belong to the monkey race, and you're bound to look like a monkey when you grow old. When you grow old, when you grow old, well, you're bound to look like a monkey when you grow old. I can tell by your knees that your folks climbing trees, and you're bound to look like a monkey when you grow old. When you grow old, when you grow old, well, you're bound to look like a monkey when you grow old. Okay, Bob. Okay, let me play a piano. I can tell by your skin that you've been drinking gin, and you're bound to look like a monkey when you grow old. When you grow old, when you grow old. Well, you're bound to look like a monkey when you grow old. Okay, Tim, let's hear that bass.
Now, as Hunter stated, the root of the culture war is opposing moral visions, and one of the key issues of the culture war is abortion. Now, I said in my first show that abortion was an issue that I wouldn't cover on the show. I'm not going to say much about it in context of the culture war other than Roe versus Wade is not going to be overturned. So perhaps we should focus on things like sex education and providing contraceptives to those who seek it. But the same people that stand so firmly against abortion also don't believe in sex education and contraception. That quite honestly baffles me. It's basic logic. Prevent the pregnancy and you don't have to worry about abortion. Sex and food are basically the driving forces behind every living creature, and humans are no different. Yet those who oppose abortion, while also opposing sex education and making contraception available, seem to be living in a fantasy world if they think that abstinence and prayer are the answer. Now, I know this is a cheap shot, but I have to say it. It didn't work for Sarah Palin's daughter. Enough said. Now, beyond the abortion issue, something that continues to drive the culture war is the alleged war on Christianity. Now, anything I say throughout this section of the show is not meant to disparage Christians or the Christian faith. I have respect for all beliefs and faiths. Just don't try to convert me. I have no desire to convince you to denounce your faith. Please don't ask me to adopt yours. I myself am not a Christian, but my wife is, and so is basically everyone else in my family, and pretty much all of my friends. Some are more devout than others, but I can say this, at least pertaining to my immediate family, wife, parents, siblings, close cousins, none of them get wrapped up in the culture war issues, and pretty much all of them are liberal-leaning, if not full-blown liberals. So conservatives don't have a monopoly on faith. However, I believe a meme persists that if you're a liberal, or not even that, if you are on the right side on culture war issues, and that's right with a capital R, that you're anti-Christian. So what you have is a faith at odds with itself. Now, I've done my own polling, and if I were to take the first 100 liberals that I know, I would say roughly 80 would call themselves Christians. So that's, about 80%. Now, polls I've seen show that it's actually around 60% of those claiming to be liberals call themselves Christians and believe in God. And that's compared to about 85% of conservatives. So there are definitely more conservatives than liberal Christians, but they sure don't hold a monopoly on it. And moreover, more liberals are Christian than are not. And what does this mean? Well, from where I'm sitting, I see a bunch of people that share the same faith being distracted by silly issues, while issues of real importance are ignored. And so what are these silly issues? And again, I don't mean to offend anyone if one of these issues that I'm talking about is an issue that is at the top of your political agenda. All I can say is listen closely to what I say and maybe you'll gain some perspective. And so the first issue is prayer in public schools. I say that this issue is silly because while the Supreme Court has made it clear that prayer should not be led by a school official or be a requirement of students, individuals still have the right to make their own personal prayers. No one is stopping them from doing that. So if you are a Christian or a Muslim or Jewish or whatever, you can still pray on your own. But let's be honest, this issue is about Christian prayer in public schools. Those that want this are being narrow-minded. Now, I don't deny that we are a mostly Christian nation, but that is irrelevant to me. The Establishment Clause found in the First Amendment makes it clear that the government shall neither establish a national religion nor favor a particular religion, and the Supreme Court has upheld that on 3 occasions: Engel v. Vitale in 1962, Wallace v. Jaffrey in 1985, and Lee v. Wiseman in 1992. In general, the Court has demonstrated a willingness to strike down any practices that might be likely to be perceived either as coercive or as state endorsement of religion. So dwelling on this issue to me is a waste of time. If you would like your children to pray before school, tell them to do so. But don't ask that a teacher or a principal lead the prayer. By doing this, a public official would be endorsing or showing favor to a religion, which violates the First Amendment. Now, the next issue that I find to be a silly waste of time even discussing is the debate of whether one nation under God should be said in our Pledge of Allegiance. Now, God is a vague term. It's not necessarily specifying who's God, yet it is still a term that is exclusive. But again, let's be honest. The term is meant to imply a Christian God. Moreover, I've never seen anyone but a Christian complain about it being omitted. So again, the use of this term in a public school violates the Establishment Clause. Now here's where this gets interesting, because I don't know that too many people even know the origins or history of the Pledge of Allegiance. The pledge was penned in 1892 by a Socialist Baptist minister named Francis Bellamy. That's right, I said socialist. I paused there to let all the conservative listeners gasp. Bellamy wrote the pledge because he thought that patriotism was waning at the end of the 19th century following the brutality and aftermath of the Civil War. What's most interesting is Bellamy, even though he was a minister, didn't include the word God in the pledge. Here's his original version. I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In 1923, my flag was changed to the flag, so that new immigrants wouldn't be confused as to where their loyalty should lie. But notice God was still absent from the pledge. It wasn't until 1954 that under pressure from the Catholic group, the Knights of Columbus, that Congress and President Eisenhower added God to the pledge. So for its first 62 years of existence, we had a godless pledge. Now over the past decade or so, there have been numerous cases in which people have challenged the use of under God in the pledge. Unfortunately, it is often framed as an attack on Christianity rather than an upholding of the Constitution and basic liberty. I mean, look, if the tradition of reciting the pledge with God in it went all the way back to 1892, I would probably say who cares, leave it in there, and if your kid isn't comfortable saying it, they can skip over that part. But it is a contrived tradition. It wasn't written with God in it. So to me, it's a moot point. Now, to be fair, when it comes to things such as the Ten Commandments in courthouses or nativity scenes in public spaces, I say let them be shown. There's a lot of tradition behind this. I mean, the nativity scenes are there just for a few weeks, and the commandments are actually some good words to live by. I think anyone wanting to take these things down is likely just being a dick. Moreover, they're adding fuel to a fire that needs to be put out so that secular and Orthodox people can come together to focus on issues of importance. We need to stop worrying about when or where God can be said. If you are truly a Christian, then I think you must believe that God is everywhere. So why the hell does it matter if its name is uttered? Let's move past that. And if you're secular, take your little victories pertaining to prayer in school and a pledge and stop being a dick. Let towns have their nativity scenes and 10 Commandments in their courthouses. It's called compromise, and we all need to practice it from time to time. It's my opinion that Christians who let culture war issues such as prayer in schools, gay rights, and abortions drive their politics are actually allowing these issues to convolute their faith. Now, coming from a pagan such as myself, that doesn't mean much. But while searching for material for the show, I came across this article titled 7 Reasons I Hate the Culture War, and it was penned by the Christian pastor David Flowers. And here's what Mr. Flowers had to say. Being a progressive Christian is a tough racket. It seems most Christians are not progressive, which, if you read the linked description of the term, indicates that most Christians are still defined largely by polemics, being against things. Perhaps nothing better embodies polemics than the culture war. In reality, the culture war is toxic to Christianity, and actually has almost nothing to do with it. Christians need to reject it right now and adopt gospel priorities. Here are 7 reasons I hate the culture war. 1. Its issues, the war on Christmas, homosexuality, abortion, prayer in school, etc., are not gospel issues. 2. Despite number 1, it nevertheless positions itself as the Christian voice in our society, and he has the completely capitalized. 3. It mistakes preferences for commandments. Let's face it, Christians may prefer nativity scenes in public places, but there's no command that we should have one or are entitled to one. An atheist seeking to eliminate such nativity scenes has as much right to the judicial process as a Christian does, and is doing nothing wrong by seeking to eliminate it. Further, if he should win, Christians have lost nothing essential to the practice of our faith. We fight heated battles over issues where we stand to lose nothing, other than, but I think it's nice. 4. It is largely sentimental and not substantive. 5. It seeks, focuses on, and requires an enemy. In the culture war, the enemies are liberals, atheists, and gays. Gospel-wise, the moment someone is identified as an enemy, we are commanded to love and pray for them. Christians fighting the culture war do exactly the opposite. 6. In focusing on enemies and enlisting people, especially pastors, in the war, it marginalizes Christianity. Christians cannot redeem the culture by fighting for it, but only by modeling the love and sacrificial lives Christ actually called for. It is thus an aspect of the Christian faith that is almost entirely of the world. 7. The culture war focuses heavily on our rights as Christians. This is perhaps one of its most toxic aspects, because according to Jesus, Christians have no rights whatsoever except the right to die to self and follow Christ. By recruiting Christians into a war and requiring them to fight, the culture war leads Christians into today's equivalent of the Crusades. Years from now, Christians will be as embarrassed by the culture war as we are of the Crusades and Inquisition. I hope. Now that's the end of what Flowers had to say, to which I say, Amen.
Please stop your talking. Is that in my head, in my head, in my head? Please stop, I don't wanna go. I know you barely had a chance to know. Please let me go quickly. It hurt, I could be wrong. It's the only thing I ask of you. Don't come around here anymore. It's the only thing I ask of you. Don't come around here anymore. It's the only thing I ask of you. Don't come around here anymore. It's the only thing I ask of you.
In point 7 of that last section, Flowers stated that the culture war focuses heavily on our rights as Christians. This is interesting because one of the main goals of the religious right in the culture war is preventing homosexuals from gaining rights, while at the same time they are trying to portray themselves as the oppressed. I mean, this is how I see it, and your opinion or view might be different, and that's okay. But I don't see there being a war on Christianity or Christian values. There is, however, stronger pushback against the influence of Christianity, or any religion for that matter. For the first 200 years or so, while no particular religion was supposed to be favored, Christianity dominated our culture. Now that secular people and other religions are gaining more of a voice in our national discourse, Christians are feeling threatened. They don't like not being the only voice in the conversation. But understand, if you are a Christian and you feel threatened, no one can diminish your faith but you. Homosexuals could marry, women could have abortions, prayer could be left to the individual in out of public forums, and our children could pledge allegiance to our flag without it being a nation under God, and you are still the same Christian you were. Now what can diminish you as a Christian, and also diminish your faith, is the continuance of focusing on oppressing the rights of gay citizens or demanding that prayer be allowed in schools, when you should be working to ensure that every citizen has the same rights, regardless of gender, religion, ethnicity, or sexual persuasion. And you should be focusing on properly educating our kids, not indoctrinating them. I would like to repeat point 6 that Flowers made in the previous section. In focusing on enemies and enlisting people, especially pastors, in the war, it marginalizes Christianity. Christians cannot redeem the culture by fighting for it, but only by modeling the love and sacrificial lives Christ actually called for. It is thus an aspect of the Christian faith that is almost entirely of the world. So concerning gay rights and its place in the culture war, I think those who oppose gay rights have to see that they are losing this part of the war. In the 2012 election, 3 states voted to allow gay marriage: Maine, Maryland, and Washington. Also, Wisconsin elected Tammy Baldwin as the country's first openly gay U.S. senator. And I think you will see more states adopt measures to allow gay marriage over the next several years. And interestingly enough, I came across an article in LiveJournal that suggests the church hasn't always been opposed to unions between 2 men and 2 women. Even as late as the 18th century, documents can be found that provide evidence of church-sanctioned homosexual union, according to Professor John Boswell, the late chairman of the Yale University History Department. And this is some of what the article says. Contrary to myth, Christianity's concept of marriage has not been set in stone since the days of Christ, but has constantly evolved as a concept and ritual. Professor John Boswell, the late chairman of Yale University's History Department, discovered that in addition to heterosexual marriage, ceremonies in ancient Christian church liturgical documents, there were also ceremonies called the Office of Same-Sex Union, 10th and 11th century, and the Order of Uniting 2 Men, 11th and 12th century. These church rites had all the symbols of heterosexual marriage. The whole community gathered in a church. A blessing of the couple before the altar was conducted with their right hands joined. Holy vows were exchanged. A priest officiated in the taking of the Eucharist, and a wedding feast for the guest was celebrated afterwards. These elements all appeared in contemporary illustrations of the Holy Union of the Byzantine warrior emperor Basil I, 867 to 886 CE, and his companion John. Such same-gender Christian-sanctioned unions also took place in Ireland in the late 12th and early 13th century, as the chronicler Gerald of Wales recorded. Same-sex unions in pre-modern Europe list in great detail some same-gender ceremonies found in ancient church liturgical documents. One Greek 13th century rite, order for solemn same-sex union, invoked Saint Serge and Saint Bacchus, and called on God to vouchsafe unto these, thy servants, the grace to love one another and to abide without hate, and not be the cause of scandal all the days of their lives, with the help of the Holy Mother of God and all thy saints. The ceremony concludes, and they shall kiss the holy gospel in each other, and it shall be concluded. Another 14th century Serbian Slavonic office of the same-sex union, uniting two men or two women, had the couple lay their right hands on the gospel while having a crucifix placed in their left hands. After kissing the gospel, the couple were then required to kiss each other, after which the priest, having raised up the Eucharist, would give them both communion. Records of Christian same-sex unions have been discovered in such diverse archives as those in the Vatican, in St. Petersburg, in Paris, in Istanbul, and in the Sinai, covering 1,000 years from the 8th to the 18th century. Now you can link to the entire article from the show's website, and this is the way I see it. The Church can set whatever policy it chooses concerning homosexual union and homosexual rights, and it seems as if those policies have waffled over the years, but those policies should have nothing to do with public policy, at least not in this country. If you are morally opposed to gay unions, that's your right, but your perceived moral superiority does not trump another individual's civil rights, and I believe that gay marriage is a civil rights issue. So whether a church sanctions two men or two women getting married is entirely up to that church, and the state should stay out of that. But conversely, the church needs to stop trying to use its influence to keep states from sanctioning it. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to cover concerning the culture war takes us back to education, specifically the type of education our children will receive in the future, because school's curriculum is now a major battleground in the culture war. Some of it is based on religious belief, such as a recent push in Indiana to allow creationism to be taught in public schools, and some of it is based on ideology, such as the Texas Board of Education's decision to allow revisions to our history a few years ago. I think it's natural that there will always be debates over what our children should be taught in public schools, but I think it should always be based on the best available science. Moreover, I think that we should keep important figures such as Thomas Jefferson in our history books, even if they were deists and not Christians. Science or known history shouldn't be a casualty of the culture war. They should be embraced. I fear that if we continue to allow culture war issues permeate our public schools and devalue basic scientific principles and historical fact, there will be long-term ramifications for our society. We might raise a generation of moral mavens, but they'll be academic idiots. So what would it mean if some of the key issues of the culture war were no longer in play? What if our politicians no longer worried about legislating for or against gay marriage, or erasing mentions of enlightenment in our history books, or changing school curriculum to include creationism? Or what if our courts weren't blocked up with litigation trying to get a nativity scene removed, or a 200-year-old plaque of the Ten Commandments removed? What if Christians accepted that while they are the majority in this country, they still don't have the right to be the moral authority for everyone? Conversely, what if atheists accepted that some things are so ingrained in our culture that even though they might possess Christian symbolism, they don't necessarily connote the state supporting establishment of Christianity as a state religion? What if we set these issues of morality aside and focused on issues of substance, like working together to shape an economic system that works for everyone, not just the 1%? Or work together to stop the perpetual war we have found ourselves in? Or work together to craft an energy policy for the future that moves us out of the dark ages of fossil fuel extraction and into the light of clean, green energy? We are only hurting ourselves and our children's possible future if we continue to ignore issues of substance because we think our nation's moral fiber is at stake. So every shot taken in the culture war is really a shot taken at ourselves. Here's a newsflash. You don't have to believe in God and be Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Hindu or whatever to be highly moral. I don't believe in God. And while I'm not one to toot my own horn, I would bet that if you ask my close friends and relatives, they would say I am one of the most moral people they know. Why? Because I'm a humanist. I believe in improving the human condition, and I believe in doing it for everyone. I don't need a God or a religion to tell me this should be. I think it should be self-evident. So let's lay down our metaphorical arms and extend our real arms to embrace the other. And what is the other? It's that which we don't understand, that which is foreign to us, that which cannot be but yet exists. Until we do that, the culture war will continue to distract us from the issues of substance, and at least this is my contention, we will never truly be able to consider ourselves a civil society. Why do I say that? Because a civil society isn't in perpetual war with itself.
You only need a pen to draw a hole in my head. The laughs and the smiles and the cheers and the shines got nipped in the bud. You only need a pen to draw a hole in my head. The groans and the frowns have been drowned in a pool of mud.
Well, that's going to conclude this episode of Left, Right, in the Middle. I don't suspect that anything I said in this episode will convince anyone to change their views concerning any aspect of the culture war, but sometimes things need to be said. If the culture war is at its base a product of ideology, as Hunter says, then even if the current issues are eventually resolved, new battlefronts in the war will always arise. I guess my hope is that future issues won't detract from issues of importance, that a desire for moral enlightenment doesn't keep us from reaching societal enlightenment. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Left, Right, in the Middle. Until then, you can visit the website lrtmpodcast.com to download past episodes and links to the show's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show or political topic. So I'll leave you with another excerpt from the Culture War. And again, the entire video can be viewed from the show's website. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Life in the trenches was not easy during the Great Culture War. Regular, small-town folks would struggle for days, even weeks, without access to pro wrestling or cheese puffs. Meanwhile, young urban professionals would scrounge for soy milk to put in their children's lattes.
It was awful. Militia groups would ambush our mailbox and steal our New Yorkers and our Restoration Hardware catalogs. We couldn't go see the new Woody Allen movie because we didn't know what David Denby thought of it.
Every night we'd sit around and tell stories of happier times to my 2 sons and 6 daughters. How we used to go to tractor pulls on weekends or go hunting in the nature preserves. Just last week, my daughter Brillo said to me, "Mama, what's a 4-point buck?" Tears just welled up in my eyes as I realized she ain't never shot one. She's 6 years old.
Hey you, you're getting closer to the box. And when they close it and they put it underground, you'll have no way out again. There's only one horse and 20 riders, only one of them will get to ride it, and all of the rest are gonna have to see it go, go, go. Cha-cha-da-da-da, cha-cha-da-da.